This is the Ridge OnAir.
Welcome to the first episode of the Ridge OnAir. This is a new podcast series brought to you by the Ridge School. My name is Boo Prince. I will be your host for the next half an hour or so. And I'm sure you're wondering, how on earth did this come about? Well, I'm a parent at the school, and basically for the last couple of years, I have been astonished at the incredible wealth of information, the depth of expertise, which is in our school that we very often don't actually get to hear about or have access to. So this is the answer. Welcome to the future of communication. We're going to be doing this podcast for you regularly, and we hope that it will offer you a lot of useful information and empower you with lots of tips and techniques and ideas about what is going on in the school, what your sons are learning, and the kind of incredible expertise and depth of knowledge that they are being exposed to on a daily basis.
You're listening to the Ridge OnAir.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what is coming up on the show. So first of all, we're going to be having a fantastic interview with Mandy, Herold, who all of you know as the junior primary principal, and we're going to be talking about the philosophy of conscious discipline and specifically looking at connection. If you're not completely sure what we're talking about, don't worry, we're going to give you all the information. We've also got fantastic Ridge School news. We're going to learn a little bit more about grade 7 leadership projects, and then we have a fascinating interview with Mrs. Nicci Kurz. Now, Nicci Kurz is the head of visual arts at the school, and she also heads up the research and innovation department. And Nicci is going to be talking about STEAM. What is STEAM? If you're wondering what it stands for, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, how do we integrate these subjects, and what are the remarkable outcomes of implementing this style of teaching and learning at the Ridge? And then, of course, I know dads, I know what you're waiting for. There is a sports report. That's all coming up in just a moment.
This is the Ridge OnAir.
Welcome back. Well, here is our opportunity to learn a little bit more about conscious discipline. Mandy, Herold, I must say, I feel slightly odd saying welcome to you when you're the principal of the school. But it is such an absolutely incredible opportunity to have the chance to talk to you about something which is such a deep passion for you. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge today.
Thank you, Boo, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to connect in this space. It's something brand new for us, and I think it's tremendously exciting.
So let's start about talking a little bit about the idea of conscious discipline. What does conscious discipline actually mean?
So what conscious discipline is a social and emotional learning program. And it's about being more present and being more conscious in the way that we engage with children, whether that be as a parent or as an educator.
So just even the words conscious and discipline, and when we think about consciousness, it makes me think about like being mindful and being intentional. And I know you said something so interesting to me the other day about the word discipline, about where it comes from.
Absolutely. And if we think about how we were brought up, you teach as you were taught, you parent as you were parented, until you do your best until you know better. And for me, discipline has always been synonymous with punishment.
Right.
But actually, if you look at the word discipline, it comes from the word disciple, which means to teach. And I think this is something that we miss often when we are operating in a space where we're working with children. We are trying to look at their behavior, and we are trying to teach them in an academic space. But what I believe that we can do much better is work with them in a social and emotional space.
So, you know, Mans, when any of us became a parent for the first time, I mean, I think one of the shocks for all of us was like, I have been gifted with this beautiful little life to guard and take care of and nurture, but I don't know what I'm doing. And when it comes to discipline, many of us, I mean, not everyone, you know, some parents get it more right than others. I know that, I mean, if you asked my sons, they'd say, oh, mum's a real shouter. You know? And it's true. And then you see other parents who, you know, are very much more laissez-faire.
Yes.
And we tend to associate this idea with discipline as either not being enough or being overbearing, one way or the other. So you mentioned actually at the Parents' AGM recently this idea of connection as an incredibly powerful and important part of conscious discipline.
Absolutely.
Can you give us some insights around that?
Absolutely. So, Boo, what I fundamentally believe is that connections govern behavior. If rules govern behavior, then our prisons wouldn't be full. And if you look at connection and relationships and how that governs behavior and how we can use those connections to teach. And what I had mentioned at the PA AGM is that connection is made up of 4 components: eye contact, physical touch, being present in a playful space. And this component, the 4 connections, elements of connection together, produce something called joy juice. And joy juice and joy juice is made up of dopamine, oxytocin, and opioids.
Right.
And it's chemically, it wires our brain for willingness and self-control. So the connections on the outside that we do with our children make connections on the inside, which means they literally wire our brain for willingness and self-control.
Okay, you have just in the space of like 30 seconds, you have said some unbelievably powerful things there. So I just want to recap for a second. The 4 pillars of connection are eye contact, physical touch, being present,
in a playful space.
In a playful space. Look at you. You've got little hand movements to help us remember.
That's right. And I think, Boo, it's something we do so naturally with infants and toddlers.
Right.
When you think about the nursery rhymes, if you've got a baby on a changing table, you are completely connected to that child because you need to keep them safe.
Right.
And you blow zerbits on their tummy and you do round and round the garden. And yet, when they start to move and they start to be more mobile, we suddenly want to control the behavior, obviously to keep them safe. But there's something so magical in those 4 components of connection: eye contact, physical touch, being present in a playful space. And I spoke recently to some grade 1 boys about mindfulness and what was the opposite of mindfulness. And we spoke about distraction. And I was unbelievably moved, Boo, by the fact that these 6 and 7-year-olds understand and can sense when their parents or their teachers are distracted.
Yeah, no, they absolutely can. And I think that one of the things which is so extraordinary for me is actually to see the levels of perception in our children. And you've actually said another thing. You're like a real mentor to me, Mandy. Like, you know, I never had little brothers and sisters or baby cousins to babysit or whatever. So for me, having children, those are the first kids that I really had any major interaction with. And you do sometimes feel lost. I think all of us sometimes feel lost.
Absolutely.
But the one day you said to me, all behavior is communication. And when we remember that, it's not just, that just blew my mind, because I looked at my kids and I realized even when they're not saying stuff, they're communicating with me. And equally, my actions are being communicated to them. So when I'm frustrated, they pick it up. When I'm distracted, they pick it up. When I'm joyful, when I'm genuinely present, they pick it up. All these things, they pick it up.
Absolutely. And when we look at how we engage with children, and we look at how we teach them, values are taught not through the lectures that we give, but rather through the human interactions. So our children are watching us all the time. 55% of our communication is nonverbal, and they pick up the energy. They pick up when something's not okay. And something that I think is really significant, Boo, about teaching children these emotional and social skills is if we look at how we teach children in a classroom or as a parent. If you're teaching your child to ride a bicycle, How many times do you let them make an oops or fall off or give them the assistance of training wheels? How many times do you do that until they master the skill? And the answer is as many times as they need to. Likewise with a cognitive skill, with learning to read or handwriting or even mathematics. How many times do we let the children bump their heads and figure out a different way? How many times do we let them do that until they can master the skill?
Right.
Same with our social skills. And at the Ridge, we're big on manners. We're big on respect. We're big on boys being polite and aware about what's going on around them and saying good morning and good afternoon and letting adults walk through the door first. How many times do we reinforce that behavior on a social level?
Right.
As many times as we need to. And yet, why is it that when it comes to an emotional skill, how many times do we let children really experience their emotions?
Wow.
Until they can be successful. So, for example, if a child is really angry or a child is really sad, how is it that we as adults tend to dismiss that emotion or want to move through it so quickly because we don't know, we were never taught how to process our own emotions. And yet to coach a child through a feeling of anger or a feeling of frustration, a feeling of sadness, you are teaching that child a skill that they will be able to use for the rest of their lives.
Okay, so Mandy, you're saying something really, really profound here. In exactly the same way that we coach a child to ride a bicycle or write their name, we need to coach them through their what is ultimately self-regulation, right?
That's right.
Our emotional states. Okay.
And it takes a conscious adult to teach the children the missing skill.
Absolutely.
And I think, again, we are functioning in a society where we're just doing the best that we can at the time with what we've got. But we live in a very stressful world. And it's about taking that moment, being more conscious, controlling yourself so that you can teach a child a missing skill.
So, just to give everybody an opportunity to connect with you, and I know that you've also been running some workshops, you've opened up some slots in your week to do a bit of parent coaching.
That's right.
So for parents who are struggling, and by the way, it doesn't matter if you're in the junior prep or in the senior prep, come and see Mandy, come and talk to Mandy Herold and just get some guidance, get some reassurance, and feel better about it. You don't need to be alone on this journey.
Absolutely.
Can we get an email address?
Absolutely, Boo. And what I wanted to say is that we're all in this together, and it's not that I've got all the answers, but I have a passion for parents. And so you can get hold of me on email, mherold@ridgeschool.co.za. And just to say that this conscious discipline has been going in America for the last more than 20 years. So if you'd like to have a look at the Conscious Discipline website, it's www.consciousdiscipline.com.
And there are also books available. There are a lot of resources.
That's
right. You
right.
don't need to feel alone. Thank you so much for being with us. I've loved talking to you.
Thank you.
As always, I'm enriched and empowered by our
Thank you.
conversations. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Boo. What a privilege. Thank you.
Okay, well, in just a few moments, we have our second interview coming up, and that, of course, is with Mrs. Nicci Kurz. We're going to be speaking about the STEAM program at the Ridge and the extraordinary outcomes of the program. Stay with us. Every year, the headmaster sets a leadership project challenge to our grade 7 boys, and this project actually has 4 components: community service, physical development, self-improvement, and an organizational component. We figured that the Ridge OnAir podcast was a perfect opportunity to give you a little bit of insight into some of these projects.
Leadership at the Ridge.
Speckboom is an indigenous wonder plant, able to absorb 10 times more pollution than any other plants. The speckboom is edible, water-wise, and beautiful. And planting speckboom in your garden is a great way to help combat climate change. Remember, every little action helps to create a greener future for us all. My name is Jake Jackson, and for my grade 7 community leadership project, I planted and sold 180 speckboom plants to raise awareness of this incredible plant and to raise funds for the Salvazoni School. Thank you to every parent in Ridge Boy who supported my project. It made it so successful. Because of you, the air is a little cleaner and the world is a little greener.
Email us at onair@ridgeschool.co.za.
Looking for that perfect bag that travels from beach to sports day to overseas travel? The stylish Ridge Carry-All is the ultimate go-anywhere, take-everything bag. Made from beautiful durable materials with gorgeous leather trim and discreetly embossed with the school logo. The Ridge Carry-All is rollable, foldable, fashionably huge, and built to last. It's one of the great range of high-quality branded items you'll find at the Ridge School Shop. Just remember, the school shop is the one place where plastic is welcome, as we don't take cash. We're open Monday to Friday, 7 to 8 a.m. and 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. The school shop, the right kit with the right fit.
Coming up in just a moment, we're going to have news with Elliot Cross. And then right after that, we'll be speaking to Nicci Kurz about the Ridge's STEAM program. Stay with us.
The Ridge OnAir News.
In your headlines, a dozen Ridge boys show us the right stuff. Our robotics team gears up for competition. And get ready to raid Mom's closet as we celebrate strong women in literature. With your on-air news, I'm Elliot Cross. A dozen grade 4 to 7 boys were recently recognized at the Headmasters' Assembly for demonstrating the right stuff. Mr. Richard Stanley read out citations for each of these boys, who have gone above and beyond in living the qualities and values of the Ridge School. These include respect, being intentional, showing grit, putting your heart into everything you do, and working as a team. Our Right Stuff Award recipients for February are Luke Hartman, Nicholas Goussard, Daniel Dutoy, Aidan Butler, Joshua Ferreira, Mondli Shibambu, David Chorley, Lita Letu Tuku, Nicholas Hughes, Yazini Stephen, and Jack Davenport. Grade 5 to 7 robotics aficionados have been hard at work, building and programming their mechanical masterpieces to compete in the Interschools Robotics League. By learning how to control the robot driving bases and how to trigger events using signals from sensors, our high-tech lads are excitedly gearing up to showcase their work, make new friends, and learn from the other competing teams. We wish them well and look forward to hearing the outcome of the event. And finally, get ready to raid Moms' and Sisters' wardrobes this Friday the 6th of March, when we dress up as strong women in literature for our first reading breakfast of the year. The fun theme for the breakfast was chosen as our uniquely Ridge way of honoring International Women's Day. Boys can come to school dressed as their favorite female book character, and mums and dads, so can you, with loads of great kids' books on sale and a chance to meet, greet, and read over breakfast treats. All Matildas, Nancy Drews, and Hermione Grangers are welcome. I'm Elliot Cross, and that's your on-air news.
You're listening to The Ridge OnAir.
Stay with us because we have our second interview coming up, and that, of course, is with Mrs. Nicci Kurz. We're going to be speaking about the STEAM program at the Ridge and the extraordinary outcomes of the program.
Email us at onair@ridgeschool.co.za.
I must tell you that I am so incredibly excited to speak to Mrs. Nicci Kurz. Nicci is the head of visual arts here at the Ridge, and she's also heads up the research and innovation team. And Nicci, welcome. Welcome to the On Air podcast. It's so fun to have you here.
Thanks, Boo. It's really fun to be doing this.
And you have like the best looking class in the whole school because it's so creative and you've got these beautiful projects everywhere. And as I said to you when I came to see you last week, I always peer in through the windows, and I've never had an opportunity to actually go into your art room, but it's an astonishing space where you clearly get to just go wild and experience and experiment with all kinds of different projects.
Yeah, spaces are very powerful, and I think that you need to use them to inspire creativity and thinking.
Well, speaking of inspiring creativity and thinking, you, of course, have headed up the STEAM program here at the school. And now I know that, there's been this big move towards STEM education, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But you've taken it all the way to STEAM by adding in art. Now, I can imagine this must be a huge challenge in the classroom. how do you actually go about combining science, tech, engineering, art, maths, all in one subject?
It's really not so hard because as human beings, we're not compartmentalized. So everything is connected.
Indeed.
And so it isn't a hard task. I think what's difficult is breaking down the perceptions that things should be taught separately or learned separately. But once you've done that and you've opened up that door, then there's all sorts of possibilities. I must just add that the last 3 years of doing STEAM at the Ridge have been the most fun that I've had in 20 years of teaching.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
How inspiring. So tell me a little bit about some of the projects that you've done, because, I mean, you have done really fun projects.
So I'll give you a really good example. It was our first project, and it's one of our projects that we like to repeat very often because it just you can teach it for a whole term or a whole semester. We start looking at Mars and space with the boys. So we go right out there looking at space and looking at exploration into Mars.
Wow.
Boys need to learn the wheel and axle systems so that they can design their own little Mars rover. And then the art comes into it in terms of how they make that rover aesthetically pleasing as well as functional. So all our projects work around the head, the heart, and the hands. And that's just one of those wonderful projects that does it. Once they've made their Mars rover and they race it down the hill and it's successful or it isn't, we then move to the next phase of the project, which is making a Mars habitat.
Oh,
so
wow.
How are you going to actually survive on Mars? What kind of habitat would you need? And the boys research this on their iPads, through the internet. They speak to people. They investigate various options with each other. They collaborate on how to put various parts of their Mars habitat together. And then once that's done, we move to another component, which is coming back to Earth. And now you've looked at a Mars habitat, but bring it back to our habitat. Let's go back to basics. And how do we make something sustainable and eco-friendly in our own Earth environment? And so there are 3 components to that whole lovely travel out into space and then back to our world. And through that whole process, it is a process, it's a design process. So boys start off by thinking. They then need to do the planning. They then move on to the making. They then reflect on what they've done, and then they rethink, remake, reflect again. So it's a whole circular design process, and through that process, we also build in the components of failure. It's very important for the boys to realize that they can fail, they must fail, otherwise they won't move forward. So we fail them forward.
Right. So, this is, it's just mind-blowing. Like, you have said so many incredibly powerful and valuable things because you're teaching storytelling. Right? We've talked about leaving Earth, going out into space, into the future, designing a new world, exploring a new world, then bringing technology back down to Earth. How do we design our homes, our buildings, and what is the future going to look like? I mean, I think I should phone up Elon Musk and ask for some sponsorship here. I got chased out of SpaceX last year. It was really fun. Men in black shirts with earpieces. But you've also said something incredibly powerful about the idea of grappling with large, intractable problems. Because I think that the days of seeing our teachers as people with all the answers is over, from the perspective that it really limits our creativity and really limits the ideas that we can explore in the classroom together. Has that very much been part of your STEAM project?
Yes, hugely. So we started off by being very clear on the fact that we weren't teachers. We were mentors. And we facilitate. And the boys learn to lead.
Right.
In various ways. So answers don't just sit with one person,
right,
the teacher or one boy, that there are many solutions in the room. And they see us working together as a team and grappling with issues of how to teach a multifaceted subject. And they take that into the way that they work with each other.
Right.
They see that we don't always get it right and we're going to try something different this time, and we make that process very transparent to the boys so that they know how we've planned and what's worked and what hasn't, and how we're moving it and failing forward.
So I actually just want to point out at this juncture to all our parents listening, I mean, what is so extraordinary to me about this is recently in the 2018 Harvard Business School State of Leadership report, they listed several skills which are considered actually pretty scarce in leadership around the world, in large corporations and governments everywhere. And those skills were communication, a level of comfort with complexity, being able to enable and facilitate creative thinking in a team, right? And also grappling with the idea of sort of inclusivity and diversity of thought, because that's one of the big sticking points for a lot of people, is that diversity is not necessarily about your background, it's about actually your approach and what life experiences, what divergent thinking you can bring to a project in order to massively increase the potential for the number of solutions you could come to. And so here we are at a funny little school in the southern end of Africa, and somehow you guys are getting this right when leaders all over the world are battling with those issues. Isn't that an amazing thing to think about?
That is amazing. And I think the thing that's made us successful, I'm not sure how successful yet, but we're seeing amazing results. So I'm feeling pretty positive. But the thing that's really worked so well is the fact that we are so willing to collaborate and so willing to be okay with trying something new and not afraid to make mistakes.
Right.
To take the chance, because we know that we can't be doing the things that we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Things have to change. The children want them to change.
Right.
And we have to respond to that.
And also, increasingly, we're also seeing around the world that answers and new technologies and new ways of thinking are actually coming from younger and younger people. And so, essentially, what you guys are doing is you're equipping our boys with the skills to grapple with these large, complex, vague problems. Because very often, surely, you don't know what the problem is until you start on the project. And then the problem appears or it shows itself in the process.
And that brings me to a really important point I want to make. So we are teaching STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts and maths. But STEAM is only a tool. It's a vehicle to do everything else that you've touched on, to teach those critical skills, those creative skills, the collaboration, ultimately the connection that we need to make between areas and the connection that we need to make between people. So it's a scaffolding tool to be able to give to boys so that by the time they get into high school, they are not afraid of those complexities.
Right. And how amazing that, because in our first interview, we were talking to Mandy Herold about the importance of connection and the importance of being able to create human connection in order to, encourage appropriate or good behavior. And here we're talking about something very similar, but you're just coming at it from a different direction, right?
Right.
Nicci, just very briefly, because we're almost out of time, tell me about things like the sort of materials that you use. Are we learning to recycle materials? Like, where does the stuff come from? I'm sure you've seen lots of very diverse designs.
We do try to encourage recycling as much as we can. So the entire Mars rover is a recycled thing. We use a lot of card and assembling.
Right.
And we try to encourage the boys to do everything at school. Nothing gets done at home. And to use as many materials as we have around us and not to buy anything new.
Right.
We do from time to time provide them with electrical circuits and batteries and little globes and things like that when we have electronics to work on. There's robotics components and coding components, so obviously those are more techie, but the recycling thing is a very big
That's wonderful.
area.
Nicci, one very last thing. You said something to me last week that really stayed with me. You said that the biggest point of or the most successful feedback that you have received has actually come from understanding what boys are saying about the STEAM program when they go for their college interviews. Tell me about that.
So we've had a lot of feedback from the colleges, and they've said it's unbelievable to watch your boys come alive when they start talking about STEAM. It's clearly a big favorite, and they're able to rattle off a whole lot of facts and content and knowledge based on this what seems to be quite a practical subject, but they clearly retain so much from it, and it is so meaningful for them in their lives because it has this component of relating to the real world.
Right. So they have also that sense of empowerment that we're solving real problems for the real world.
Yeah.
And art is no longer about who can colour in the best.
No, definitely not.
Nicci Kurz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
An enlightening conversation, and really for pioneering this brave new way of teaching and learning together. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Boo.
The Ridge on Air.
Stay with us. We've got sport coming up in just a few moments with Simon Massett.
The early morning coffee club, dreaming of caffeine, lined up outside Snazzy Max for the juice of the coffee bean. Smoothies, lattes, cappuccinos, or sometimes just a tea. Bring your own reusable mug and get extra smiles for free. Snazzy Max has now teamed up with Melissa from Honeybee Bakery to bring you a delicious range of fresh baked goodies daily. Choc cranberry cookies, bacon or veg quiches, mini carrot cakes, Chelsea buns, choc chip cookies, and more. The Snazzy Max Coffee Shop. See you there.
The Ridge OnAir Sport.
In your sports headlines, the Ridge First 11 bat their way to an impressive win over Highbury Prep. Climbing team captain Faison Adrus reaches for gold. And the under-12 water polo team makes a splash in Knysna. With your on-air sports, I'm Simon Massett. The Ridge First 11 cricket team recently travelled to Hilton College to participate in the Prep Schools Cricket Festival hosted by Court Wallace. The results were positive, with the highlight of the tour being a maiden first 11 century for Connor van der Walt. Connor, along with his fellow opener Aidan Barberini, put together an unbeaten opening partnership of 170 runs to lead the Ridge team to victory over Highbury by an astounding 10 wickets. Faison Adrus, a grade 7 boy and captain of the Ridge climbing team, along with fellow climbers Giulio Cianfanelli and Davron Gilo, recently competed in the African National Cup qualifier. Faison performed exceptionally well, finishing in first place and winning the gold medal, with Giulio and Davron placing 10th and 11th respectively. This event is one of two that will allow the top-placed climbers to compete in the International Federation of Sport Climbing Youth World Championships later this year. The under-12 water polo team headed down to Knysna earlier this month to participate in the Oak Hill Waterfront Chukka Festival. Our boys acquitted themselves well, winning 7 of their 8 water polo matches. Several lads in the Ridge team described competing in the ocean water of the Knysna Keys rather than in a swimming pool as a huge highlight of the tour. Mr. Siakamela, who led the Ridge team, said the tour was a fantastic success, with our boys having fun, making awesome memories and enjoying good competition and great sportsmanship. I'm Simon Massett, and that's your On-Air Sport.
The Ridge OnAir.
Thank you so much for joining us for this first episode of The Ridge On Air. It's been such a pleasure having you with us, and of course none of this would be possible without our wonderful team who have worked with us to put this podcast together. Special thanks to Joe Cotwell, Ted Laux, Mandy Herold, Nicci Kurz, Nico Siakamela, Bear Prince Venter, Kabir Badlender, Elliot Cross, Simon Massett, Jake Jackson and Shaka Buthelezi. Thank you very much for being with us, and do look out for our next episode of The Ridge On Air, which will be coming out in a couple of weeks' time. I do hope that you will give us your feedback. Tell us what you've enjoyed, tell us what you haven't enjoyed, what you'd like to hear more of on the On Air podcast, and you can get hold of us using our email address, which is onair@ridgeschool.co.za. Till next time.
You're listening to The Ridge On Air.
The Ridge On Air is brought to you by Prince Media. Voiceover, media coaching, and podcast services. Visit princemedia.co.za for more.